The morning after I received the lawsuit, I stood in front of the condo window and saw my reflection hanging over a skyline I had spent years trying to reach. Behind me were unopened boxes, a folding chair, and the cheap coffee maker I had carried through 3 apartments. This was supposed to be the beginning of my adult life. Instead, every room seemed to ask how long it would remain mine. That fear pulled me back 13 years to a rainy afternoon when I was 16 and returning from pet sitting in a faded jacket. I had earned $30 and planned to hide most of it in a college envelope behind my dresser. When I entered the kitchen, my father Robert and my mother Patricia were giving my 8-year-old sister Lily a new tablet and announcing over speakerphone that she was the future of the Bennett family. Then Patricia looked at my soaked clothes and asked whether I had remembered to buy milk. That was our family structure. Lily was the investment. I was the infrastructure. She received piano lessons, summer programs, new clothes, and patient encouragement. I received speeches about responsibility. My parents had stable jobs, but money appeared only when Lily needed something impressive. When I needed textbooks or school shoes, I was told to be realistic. At 14, I began cleaning for an elderly neighbor. At 16, I worked evenings at a bakery where the owner taught me to track expenses, save consistently, and separate wants from needs. My first paycheck was $186 after taxes. I imagined opening a savings account. Robert placed a calculator on the kitchen table and announced that 30% of every paycheck would go toward household expenses. I reminded him that I was 16. Patricia laughed and said it was never too early to learn that nobody carried you through life. Minutes later, she transferred money for Lily's private piano coach. I paid because resistance always produced another lecture about gratitude. A month later, I used part of one paycheck to buy a winter coat from a discount rack. Patricia noticed the shopping bag and asked why I was wasting money when Lily's recital costume still needed alterations. I returned the coat the next day and walked to work in the old one. That small surrender taught me something dangerous. Even money I earned did not feel morally mine. The most damaging part was not losing the cash. It was learning to feel guilty whenever I kept anything for myself. I loved Lily, which made the resentment harder. She had not designed the system. She had simply been raised inside it. Still, I often wondered why one child had to become smaller so another could shine. By my final year of high school, I was working at the bakery, taking weekend shifts at the library, and maintaining grades high enough for scholarships. I kept my savings secret because I knew my parents would rename them as a family emergency. When a state university offered me a partial academic scholarship, Robert warned that college was expensive, and Patricia asked who would replace my monthly contribution. Their disappointment was not that I might struggle, it was that my departure would interrupt a financial arrangement built around my obedience. I left for school on a bus with 2 suitcases because they claimed they could not drive me. Lily hugged me in and whispered that she wanted to be brave like me. I remembered those words whenever bitterness tempted me to blame her. I believed distance would free me from my parents. I did not yet understand that the strongest chains are the ones a family teaches you to carry inside yourself. College was not freedom at first. It was survival in a different location. I attended classes during the day, served tables 5 nights a week, and worked as a teaching assistant whenever a professor needed help. My desk lamp stayed on until 300 in the morning, and I assigned every dollar a purpose before I earned it. My scholarship covered most tuition, but not all, so I borrowed carefully and treated every loan as a future emergency. While other students planned vacations, I calculated whether replacing worn shoes would delay rent. My parents called rarely, and every conversation eventually became a request. Lily needed a new instrument. A summer program required a deposit, or the family car needed repairs. I sent money more often than I should have because they framed every request as support for my sister. I told myself I was protecting her from the scarcity I knew. In reality, I was teaching my parents that guilt still opened my bank account. The first time I refused, Patricia said Lily might lose an opportunity that could change her life, and hoped my cheap little apartment was worth it. Robert accused me of forgetting who had raised me. After the call, I blocked both numbers and cried on the floor until sunrise. Not because I believed I was wrong, but because protecting myself still felt like betrayal. Something changed after that night. I began reading about financial abuse, parentification, and families organized around a favored child. I learned that being needed was not the same as being loved. A professor recommended me for a paid internship at a financial services company, where my supervisor, Marcus Lee, trusted me with serious work and praised results instead of demanding sacrifice. That simple respect exposed how little acknowledgement I had received at home. I graduated with a finance degree, strong grades, and nearly $40,000 in student loans. No one from my family attended. Patricia said the drive was inconvenient, and Robert called ceremonies symbolic. Lily sent an apology and promised to celebrate later. Standing among cheering families, I finally stopped waiting for my parents to become different people. A classmate's mother found me alone after the ceremony and insisted on taking a photograph with me so I would have at least one picture from graduation. She asked about my goals, listened to the answer, and said she was proud of me. I nearly cried because her kindness required nothing in return. That was when I understood how abnormal my family's version of support had always been. Marcus helped me secure a full-time analyst position. I rented a tiny studio, bought secondhand furniture, and created a 5-year plan. Emergency fund, debt repayment, then a home. Every promotion became a private celebration, a book, a plant, a good kitchen knife. Yet my parents watched each achievement online. When I posted about a promotion, Robert wrote, "Now you can help your sister properly." When I paid off a loan, Patricia messaged, "Do not get comfortable. Lily's college years are coming." My success was never allowed to belong to me. At 26, I paid off every student loan. That same week, my parents demanded that I help finance an expensive private university for Lily. I offered scholarships, budgeting, and more affordable options. Robert told me to take out a personal loan because family invests in its brightest future. I asked why the family had never invested in mine. He answered, "You were always independent." That sentence ended something. Independence was not a gift they had recognized. It was the name they gave to abandonment after I survived it. I refused to borrow for Lily and blocked them again. Lily contacted me directly saying she had never asked them to pressure me and that their expectations frightened her too. We compared aid packages and she chose a respected state university. For the first time, our relationship began outside the competition our parents had created. 3 years later, as a senior analyst, I reached the number I had written in my first studio, enough for a 20% down payment, closing costs, and a 6-month emergency reserve. I quietly began looking for a home. I believed secrecy would protect the milestone. I underestimated how closely my parents were watching. The condo was modest, 2 bedrooms, an aging kitchen, a narrow balcony, and enough morning light to make the living room feel open. I loved it because it was safe, affordable, and mine. On closing day, I signed until my wrist hurt. When the agent handed me the keys, I pressed them into my palm and thought about every shift, every loan payment, and every time I had chosen a future goal over temporary comfort. I told Lily first and asked her not to mention it until I was ready. 2 days later, Patricia called and said she had found the property record online. She demanded to know why I had purchased real estate without discussing it with the family. Robert called next and asked how much cash I had used. When I refused to answer, they treated my privacy as evidence that I was hiding money from them. Against my better judgment, I invited them to a small housewarming. I hoped the presence of coworkers, neighbors, and Lily would keep the afternoon civil. Patricia used the audience as a stage. She touched cabinets, criticized the neighborhood, and told one neighbor, "It is amazing what someone can afford when she does not help her family." During lunch, Robert placed a folder beside my plate. Inside were Lily's tuition statements, housing estimates, and a highlighted home equity loan brochure. He said her aid package had changed and that $22,000 was needed for the next year. "You have collateral now," he said. "This solves the problem." I told him my home was not a family credit line. Patricia raised her voice and asked how I could sit in a new condo while my sister's future collapsed. Lily immediately said she could work, reduce her course load, or apply for more aid. Patricia snapped that she should not have to suffer because I had chosen property over family. Robert announced that I owed repayment for food, housing, and transportation during childhood. I reminded him that he had taken 30% of my wages when I was a minor. Patricia accused me of keeping a secret ledger against my own parents. I said I did not need a ledger to remember paying rent at 16 while they purchased private lessons for Lily. Then Patricia said the quiet part aloud, "Lily was the child with real potential. You were the practical one. We made choices based on that." My coworker stared at their plates. Lily looked as though she had finally heard the cost of being favored. The humiliation clarified me. I opened the front door and told my parents to leave. Robert paused on the threshold and said, "You can help voluntarily, or we can make you honor your obligation another way." Lily tried to stay, but Patricia gripped her arm and ordered her into the car. That evening, Lily called me screaming. She said I had destroyed her education, chosen a condo over her future, and humiliated our parents in front of strangers. The words sounded rehearsed. And behind her I could hear Patricia prompting her while Robert said, "Tell her what this will cost you." I asked Lily whether she truly believed I owed her my home. She went silent, then ended the call. It hurt more than anything my parents had said because for a moment they had managed to make my sister speak with their voice. The calls continued the next morning. Patricia called 12 times before breakfast. Robert called from his personal phone, his office, and blocked numbers. By evening there were 45 missed calls. They posted in the extended family group that I had locked family resources inside a condo. Relatives began messaging me about gratitude and loyalty. When I replied that no family money had been used, Patricia deleted my comment. A week later, Robert emailed a demand, pay $22,000 or sign an agreement to refinance the condo. I ignored it. 3 weeks later, a process server found me in the building lobby. My parents were suing for a constructive interest equal to 70% of my home's value. Their complaint alleged that family support had created my earning power, that I had promised to finance Lily's education, and that my purchase was unjust enrichment. Attached were selected bank transfers, cropped messages, and a declaration from Robert, claiming that part of my down payment came from a family investment account. The claim was false. Worse, he had printed it on his insurance company's letterhead and used his professional title to make the lie appear credible. That night I walked through the condo imagining a court ordering its sale. I knew the claim sounded absurd, but fear does not wait for legal analysis. By morning I had checked my mortgage account repeatedly and slept less than an hour. I contacted Elena Ruiz, a civil attorney recommended through my company. She read the complaint twice and said my parents had no automatic right to my property or authority to force one adult sibling to finance another. However, because they alleged an oral agreement and family contribution to the down payment, we had to answer with evidence rather than disbelief. Her retainer consumed a painful portion of my emergency savings. That money was meant for job loss repairs or illness. Instead, I was spending it to defend my home from the people who should have celebrated it. Elena requested tax returns, bank records, tuition statements, employment history, and every message about Lily's education. At work, I reread emails 5 times and made mistakes I normally would have caught. Patricia expanded her campaign on social media, describing an adult child who benefited from family sacrifice and abandoned her younger sister. She avoided my full name but included enough details for people to identify me. Strangers sent messages saying I should be ashamed. Elena advised silence. Courtrooms reward evidence, not volume, she said. Following that advice was harder than paying her. Every public accusation invited me to defend myself, but any emotional response could be cropped and used again. I wrote answers I never posted, saved screenshots, and watched relatives reward the loudest version of the story. Would you stay silent while your own parents publicly rewrote your life, trusting that evidence would eventually speak louder? I had no better option. So I built evidence. My records showed that the down payment came from salary deposits and an investment account solely in my name. Tax documents proved independence from age 18. Tuition statements showed I had financed my education. Old pay records supported that my parents took part of my wages during high school. Most damaging to their story, bank statements showed I had transferred more than $18,000 to them over the previous decade for repairs, bills, Lily's textbooks, and music expenses. The transfers in their complaint were genuine but reversed. They had described money I sent them as money they invested in me. Robert's so-called family investment account was primarily funded by my teenage wages and later support payments. Elena also requested metadata for the cropped messages and contacted his employer about the company letterhead. Their compliance office stated that Robert had no authority to issue private financial declarations under the company's name, and opened an internal review. The emotional pressure increased. Robert left voicemails saying legal costs would disappear if I settled. Patricia recruited relatives to call my office. When a woman claiming to be my aunt demanded to speak with my manager about my financial misconduct, Marcus called me into his office. I expected embarrassment. Instead, he told me my family's accusations did not define my professional integrity and advised me to document every contact. Being believed made me cry harder than being attacked. I began therapy through the employee program. The counselor helped me understand that I was not only afraid of losing the condo, the lawsuit had activated the oldest lesson in my body. Anything I built could be renamed as something I owed. She asked what I would tell a 16-year-old whose parents took her wages and later sued her for refusing to surrender her home. I said I would tell her she had done nothing wrong. Then practice saying it to yourself, she replied. 2 weeks before court, Lily called from her friend's phone. She had moved out temporarily after arguing with her parent. She still had the original message they had cropped. The full text read, "I will always help where I can." That means scholarships, budgeting, and practical advice, not taking loans in my name. She also revealed that Robert had drafted a statement claiming she chose her university because I guaranteed 4 years of tuition. He pressured her to sign it. She refused and photographed the unsigned document. Elena submitted the complete message, Lily's affidavit, the draft statement, and proof that the alleged family account contained my money. A metadata expert confirmed that 2 screenshots had been edited. My parents' lawyer suddenly proposed mediation. The offer required me to pay $12,000 and remain silent publicly. For one moment, I imagined paying just to make the calls stop. Then I remembered placing 3% of my teenage paycheck in an envelope while Patricia paid for another lesson for Lily. I rejected the offer. Elena warned that court would expose private details and might permanently end any chance of reconciliation. I told her the relationship had already been placed on the court docket by my parent. Paying them would not restore it. It would only teach them that escalation worked. I would not purchase peace from people who had created the war. The night before court, I stood in the dark living room and placed the house key in my palm. "This is mine," I said aloud. The sentence sounded small, but it was the first argument I needed to win. The hearing attracted unexpected attention because a local reporter noticed the unusual public filing. Parents seeking a majority interest in an adult daughter's home to fund another child's education. 2 journalists sat in the back of the courtroom. My parents arrived with their attorney and avoided looking at me. Patricia wore a wounded expression. Robert carried a thick binder and still seemed convinced that confidence could turn fiction into fact. Judge Elaine Mercer began by asking for the legal basis of the claim. Their attorney argued unjust enrichment, promissory estoppel, and an implied family agreement. He said my parents had invested in my upbringing with the expectation that I would later help Lily. The judge interrupted. Parents are legally required to support minor children. Basic care is not an investment contract. He shifted to the allegation that my down payment contained family funds. Elena presented the bank records first. The account Robert described as a family investment fund was mainly filled by my wages between 16 and 18, followed by later transfers I made as an adult. No money from it entered my mortgage escrow. My down payment came from salary and investments held only in my name. Elena then displayed a timeline of my work scholarship loans, repayment promotions, savings and purchase. 13 years of labor appeared on one page. For the first time, I saw my life not as sacrifice but as evidence. Next came the messages. Elena submitted the complete conversation, including the sentence my parents removed. The metadata report showed the screenshots were cropped after Robert copied them. Their attorney called the omission accidental. Judge Mercer's expression hardened. Elena then introduced Lily's affidavit stating that I never guaranteed tuition, and that our parents pressured her to sign a false statement. Lily was sitting in the back row beside a counselor from her university. The judge allowed her to testify. She said she did not want my home, did not expect me to pay her tuition, and had chosen a school she could continue attending through aid work and a reduced course load. She explained that I helped with scholarship forms and budgeting. Sarah gave me knowledge, she said. Our parents wanted her to give me debt. Patricia whispered Lily's name in warning. The judge immediately told her not to communicate with the witness. Elena entered the unsigned statement Robert had drafted. It claimed Lily enrolled because of my unconditional promise to pay all remaining expenses. The judge asked Lily whether I made that promise. She said no. Robert called the document a proposed summary. Judge Mercer replied, "A summary describes an event. This document invents one." Robert's declaration was examined next. Elena asked why he used company letterhead to verify that family money funded my purchase. He said he was establishing his professional qualification. Elena produced the company's response stating that he lacked authority to use its name and that compliance had opened an investigation. His confidence disappeared. When I testified, I explained that I had worked since 16, paid part of my wages to my parents, financed my education, repaid $40,000 in loans, and saved for the condo from my salary. The opposing attorney asked whether I had promised to help Lily. I said I had offered scholarships, budgeting, textbooks, and advice. Help is not the same as surrendering my home, I said. Love is not an unlimited financial guarantee. Judge Mercer asked whether my parents paid my tuition or down payment. I said no. She asked how much I had transferred to them as an adult. Elena supplied the total $18,460. The judge looked at my parent. You described this defendant as someone who abandoned her family. The records show repeated support from her to you, not the reverse. Their attorney made one final appeal to fairness between sisters. Judge Mercer answered, courts do not equalize siblings by confiscating one adult's property to fund another, nor do courts convert parental disappointment into a lien. After a recess, she dismissed every claim with prejudice, ordered the immediate removal of the notice placed against my home, and ruled that the lawsuit lacked a reasonable factual basis. She ordered my parents to reimburse my documented legal fees and allowed Elena to seek additional sanctions for misleading filing. Then she addressed them directly. Your daughter's earnings are not family property merely because you disapprove of her choices. Raising a minor child does not purchase a future percentage of that child's assets. The court is especially concerned that you used litigation to preserve a family hierarchy and attempted to place one daughter against the other. Counseling may be beneficial, but accountability cannot be ordered into existence. Outside the courtroom, a reporter asked my parents whether adult children owed repayment for being raised. Robert walked past without answering. Patricia covered her face. I said nothing. Lily stopped beside the reporters and said my sister did not steal my future. She showed me how to build one. That sentence became the headline the next morning. The consequences moved quickly. Robert's employer placed him on administrative leave for unauthorized use of company letterhead and later removed him from his supervisory position after a compliance review. He kept his job but lost the authority and status he valued. Patricia's coworkers and community contacts saw the article and her public accusation. She was asked to step down from a fundraising committee. Relatives who had attacked me deleted comments and claimed they had not known the facts. Elena filed for fees, and my parents faced the possibility of a separate defamation claim. To avoid another case, they removed every accusation and published a retraction in the family group, stating that no family money funded my home and that their lawsuit had been dismissed. It was not a sincere apology, but the lie was corrected where they had spread it. Lily moved out permanently and reduced contact with them. She found part-time work and adjusted her course schedule. My parents went to court claiming they were protecting her future. Instead, they lost daily access to both daughters, a substantial amount in legal fees. Robert's professional standing, Patricia's social position, and the family image they had protected at our expense. When Elena handed me the court-stamped order releasing my property, I did not feel the wild satisfaction revenge stories promised. I felt air return to a room that had been sealed for years. I walked outside with Lily beside me. For the first time, neither of us was standing in the role our parents assigned. We were simply two sisters carrying the truth together. The condo felt different after the legal notice was removed. Nothing physical had changed, but I stopped hearing danger in every phone vibration. I painted the second bedroom, bought a real sofa, and placed the court order inside a drawer. I did not want my home to become a monument to the battle. I wanted it to represent the life that continued afterward. The fee reimbursement restored most of my emergency saving. Months later, I earned another promotion and began writing online about financial independence, family pressure, and the emotional cost of being treated as the responsible child. I focused on practical knowledge, separating accounts, protecting credit, documenting transfers, recognizing coercive debt, and setting boundaries before a crisis becomes a lawsuit. Thousands of readers responded with their own stories. Some had been pressured to co-sign loans. Others had supported relatives for years and were still called selfish the first time they said no. The community did not celebrate revenge for its own sake. It shared education, knowledge, templates, and warnings so people could protect themselves before manipulation became financial damage. My condo became the background of those conversations, not as a symbol of wealth, but as proof that stability can be built without permission. Lily and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. She managed her own budget, worked part-time, and graduated one semester later than planned. When she received her diploma, I was in the audience. Our parents were not. She later told me, "You did not save me by paying. You saved me by refusing to let them turn me into a reason to destroy you." Patricia eventually requested a meeting. She blamed the lawsuit on fear and panic. I told her panic did not crop messages, draft false statements, or misuse professional letterhead. Choices did that. I explained that any future relationship required therapy, direct accountability, and no financial requests. She called those conditions cold. I told her they were the warmest conditions I could safely offer. Robert never apologized privately. His public retraction remained the closest he came. The loss of his supervisory role angered him more than losing contact with both daughters, and that truth confirmed why distance was necessary. Patricia attended several counseling sessions, but progress was inconsistent. I stopped measuring healing by whether they changed and began measuring it by whether their choices still controlled my peace. 1 year after buying the condo, I hosted a small dinner. Lily Marcus, friends, and neighbors filled the rooms my parents had criticized. No one asked what my home could finance for them. They brought food, stories, and laughter. Standing in the kitchen, I remembered Patricia calling the condo a monument to selfishness. She was wrong. It was a boundary made visible. Money earned by your own labor is not a debt you owe for being born. Education and knowledge can help a person build independence, but no lesson matters more than understanding where responsibility ends and manipulation begins. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are the price of freedom, and sometimes the only answer people respect after ignoring every softer one.